cult members, and welcome to Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
And welcome to our spoiler reaction review discussion of the book of Boba Fett, Chapter 7, In the Name of Honor. I gotta do something funky every time, right? And that's the review. Thanks for coming in. Okay. The name In the Name of Honor, it's really good. Like some of the, the From the Desert Comes a Stranger or whatever. Yeah. It's a very Western kind of feel, whatever.
Yeah.
But the name of In the Name of Honor has been the MO for Mando and Boba from Jump and Boba from when he was with his dad. It's like I just love that. I just love that I love that title. I love that kind of concept of putting that in your head and then they reinforce it later on. But
well, I mean the whole thing, right? The Cobb Vanth, and Freetown coming to to not defend him, but
fight along his side.
Well, no, he's not there.
Well, not Cobb.
To avenge him. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. They came to avenge him, and Boba and Din just like, hey, we're gonna go down here, and then Boba and what's the blue guy's name?
Oh, Cobb Vanth. No. Cad Bane.
Cad Bane. There you go.
I did that
There's
earlier
too many
too.
C.
Yeah, it's Star Wars.
Getting his revenge there, and
it's
his
just
honor,
it's just that I just love that idea like this. Before we go too far into this, it's going to be very spoiler heavy. If you're watching this, you've probably watched the episode and want our opinion on it. But we're also going to talk about the series as a whole too.
Okay.
Because there's some stuff that I want to talk about there too. But
okay.
This episode was just, we had 6 episodes building up to the big fight. Right. And this was the quote unquote big fight. Now, I think some people online were expecting some big war kind of fight,
like intergalactic war.
I don't even know if they were expecting that. I think they were expecting something maybe more of a spectacle. I haven't seen anybody complain about that part, but I just think that maybe a lot of people were expecting a big spectacle of a fight. And there was a Rancor, there was 2-story tall battle droids with shields, and it kept escalating, but the stakes were for the soul of Tatooine.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a very small story in something called Star Wars.
Right. But, Tatooine's always been, it's just a desert planet with a lot of, sand people and they're not into what's going on out there.
They're just trying to make enough to get by.
Yeah.
Make enough water to get by.
Yeah, and they're a way station. Obviously, they're aware of, star cruisers and all that stuff because, it's there. They come in, they have their ships and stuff, and the one chick works on, ships and stuff.
Yeah.
So they make some of their living off of that, but that's not, even Luke's uncle was kind of just like, oh, those off-worlders, and you need to stay here and live here like the rest of us. And
a lot of that was just trying to keep Luke safe because he knew who Luke was, but also that's an example of what people there were. They did it with the Tashi Station scene with
Luke's childhood friends.
I want to say Biggs, and I know that's not right, but even them, they know that there's a wider universe out there, and they talk about people on Tatooine trying to go to the Empire Academy to be Imperial officers in other media, and that's their way of getting off planet and getting out in the world. And but this battle, I think a lot of people had this envision of Braveheart or Geonosis, the Battle of Geonosis, if we're going to use a Star Wars term or whatever, but it wasn't that. It was never going to be that. It was always going to be smaller stakes in the grand scheme of this overall story of Star Wars, but huge stakes for these people.
Right. And I mean, Boba just, he said it multiple times. He didn't have the numbers, right? So that was never going to happen. He just, the people that he had were the people that were there plus Freetown, because he wasn't really, aware that they were going to be coming along until they showed up. But yeah, the people that stood were his people and Mando's people, and that was it. On the planet. People on the planet.
People on the planet. And I want to talk about, at least for this last, I want to talk about this. Some people are complaining about the show overall. And I understand some of the criticisms the last couple episodes that it's called the Book of Boba Fett and it's been mostly Grogu and Mando. And I can understand that conversation. But this whole show has been about found family, being a good leader, being a leader caring for the people instead of living off the people. And also the idea of being a good person. Just because you were a bad person in your past, you can change. And Boba made a concerted effort after his time with the Tuskens to be a better person, and he tried to instill that in the people around him. And that's why at the final battle, these people came to his aid. They had, and sure, the joke was, they hired Chrysanthemum and they hired the mods, but they were loyal.
Yeah, they had every chance to, Chrysanthemum didn't have to come at the end, right? He's like carrying a bunch of aliens. I don't know what they were called.
It was the Pikes. It was the
Pikes.
It Pikes? Yeah, it was the Pikes. Yeah.
I was gonna say the Balchinians, but
that was earlier.
That was earlier. So he's carrying a bunch of them on his back, trying to get there to help them, and just because they were hired maybe to begin with, Boba kind of instilled more of a family feel to him.
And the thing that sold it for me was after the battle had been done and Grogu, we'll talk about Grogu. Oh, my heart. But after the battle is done and the leadership of the different houses have been taken out by Finnick finally showing off her I'm a badass proper.
Kill you all.
Yeah. So good.
So good.
The scene of them walking along the streets and all of the residents of Mos Espa like bowing to him, and he was very nice and courteous and bowing back or whatever. But the big thing for me was the scene at the end where he gives the fruit to Chrysanthemum and the mods kind of start harassing him like, well, you didn't bring enough for the rest of us, and like that family dynamic. He brought all these people together and they all stayed, and here's an example of why they stayed. They cared about the integrity of each other and staying with each other, and that was the whole show for me. What the whole show for me was somebody who had a bad past got better, was taught what a proper family is. He never had a proper family, Boba.
Right.
And then he learned that, had it taken from him, and he decided instead of going on a revenge tour, which he kind of did anyways.
He kind of did. Wrong people, but it got there in the end.
We got there in the end. But he built his own tribe. He built his own people. And found family is the basis of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling with the people who just didn't get that in this show.
And there are a bunch of oddball, maybe not taken seriously, like the mods. And then Chrysanthemum was just...
a big-time loser because he got kicked off of Kashyyyk.
And he was, kind of treated badly. Some of it, deserved. But one of the things that I've been saying is, if you're going to complain about this show, everybody complained when Boba showed up in the second season of The Mandalorian. Right. How can he be alive? How can, how did he get out of the Sarlacc pit? That's, this is... You've just blown everything we've ever known out of the water because, this is how it's been. And so whether they had this in mind before Boba showed up or not, they came out and answered your questions.
Right.
And now you're like, I don't like it.
If you don't like, I can get behind that conversation of this is not what was in my head. This is not what I expected to get. I can understand that conversation. What I can't get is the writing was bad, and I've had multiple conversations with multiple people, and I've seen it on TikTok that the writing was bad. And if you remember correctly, in the original trilogy, Boba had 4 lines.
Yeah.
And he's not a big conversationalist.
Yeah.
But what the world building and what they were showing in this show, I think, was lost on a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because they expected Boba Fett to be this killing machine. Even Cad Bane was like, "You're a murderer. You're a killer."
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, I've tried to get bad.
He said, "You've gotten soft." And he's like, "Yeah, we all do. You got soft in your old age." And he's like, "Yeah, it happens."
Yeah. And I just... I love this show. I love this show.
Yeah.
For everything that they did and what they were building and what they showed. And sure, it's got its critiques. The mod bikes, I love them, but they look like shit when they're riding along the road and they're bouncing.
Yeah.
Except they're floating on air.
Yeah. They're a little jarring because they're so bright and shiny in this landscape of 2 colors, brown and tan.
Brown and brown.
brown and light brown. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not like, you're into all the comics and the books and everything, and I'm not. I've watched all the movies. A New Hope, when it wasn't called A New Hope, it was just called Star Wars, and stood in line to go see it when I was like 10. But if you think the writing was bad, go back and watch the New Hope trilogy.
That's why I love this show.
I don't know that the prequels were written all that great either.
George has said multiple times, "I don't do good dialogue."
Yeah. And
Carrie was the one that was punching up the scripts a lot. And then actually that's Carrie Fisher actually became a puncher upper of scripts because of her time with George.
Yeah.
George is great at world building and like conversations about legacy and what does faith mean and what does honor mean and all of that. Like that's George is great at that. But if you ask him to have a conversation between 2 people, it ends up being, "I hate sand." And as much as I really have become a prequelist, apologetic for or standing in the mountain for the prequels.
Unapologetic.
Unapologetic. That's
yes.
the word. There's something in there. Prefixes, I think is the other word. Unapologetic about my newfound respect for the prequels. The dialogue is just, it's a 50s serial. It's supposed to be a 50s serial.
Right.
But this particular show has mirrored a lot of that kind of style, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that in the process.
I guess I would like to know see what it is that they think was.
I have a couple of feelers out for conversations with some people who are like, I didn't like some of the choices they made, and I'm like, okay, what choices? And they said they didn't want to talk about it until after more people had a chance to watch the show, and that's fair.
And that's fair. There's a difference between I don't like some of the choices that they made and the writing was bad. I guess I would just want to know, you can not, you can be like, this isn't the way I wanted it to go, or I would have gone.
Right.
But that doesn't make what happened bad. It just makes it not what you expected or not what you wanted it to be. I'm not standing on a mountaintop saying the writing was good by any stretch of the imagination, but it was very Star Wars. It was exactly what, like in The Mandalorian, where is the writing good in that? Like he doesn't talk, hardly ever.
Right.
It's everybody else. And, let's talk about fish people transporting their eggs from point A to point B, and Grogu eating them. I mean, come on.
That was a big conversation for a while. Since you brought up Grogu, let's talk about what we got from Grogu. So at the end of the previous episode, Luke presented him with a choice.
Yep.
Which is something that is both good for Luke and good for the Jedi, but he did kind of gaslight him a little bit with this is a lightsaber, this is a cool shirt, this is a lightsaber, and this is if you pick the shirt, all your friends are going to die because you're going to live hundreds and hundreds of years.
He did.
But if you pick the lightsaber, you're going to be able to help the whole. So, like,
to be fair, Luke's still young. Luke, right? He has not experienced.
Yeah,
he has experienced some poop, but not.
And it doesn't take him until after Yoda comes to him and they burn the tree in The Last Jedi that he actually finally learns the final lesson. And that's a whole different conversation for a whole different time. But when he presented him with this choice, a lot of the talk over the last week is what is Grogu going to pick?
Yeah. And
Grogu picked the shirt. Now, I am okay. I'm okay with the decision. The decision of him having attachment to somebody else after the trauma that he went through with what happened with Order 66 and everything. Like that, I'm here for that. Like he chose to be with people, with somebody that he cares about, who cares about him back.
Yep.
If he was with Luke, I'm a big Luke guy, but if he was with Luke, you were choosing a life as a monk. And you're never going to be allowed to allow somebody else in. And for me, I appreciate the decision. I like the decision. That means that we'll have Grogu in season 3 of The Mandalorian and them doing stuff together.
Yay!
Lone Wolf and Cub. Like I love all of that.
Well, and you're kind of he's 50, but he's still like a small, very young child.
Right,
and so it would be like Luke taking, now Anakin was 10 when he went,
9, 10, somewhere around
and they
there.
said he was too old.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
But Grogu, like in people years, I mean, he's still a baby.
Yeah, but he was already at the academy. He was already he was already training to be a Jedi.
Yeah, that's true.
When he was there. So like that was kind of one of the big things I took from last week was the idea that Luke said he's more remembering than me teaching him.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's actually part of the conversation that needs to be had here is that Grogu is actually more powerful and possibly more powerful, but more trained than Luke is. Just based on age, right? Luke's been around for playing with the Force for 10-ish years, right? And he started very late in life. He was 19 when he went off with Ben,
right? And
so he doesn't have a proper teacher or multiple proper teachers,
right?
Grogu did. Grogu had proper teachers, and he probably learned from Yoda because Yoda always worked with the younglings. Which is a big thing that they're talking about in the High Republic right now, is that Grogu.
Well, and we don't know his race. We don't know anything about other than Yoda, Yaddle, and now Grogu. Right. Are the only 3 of whatever they are that we've even encountered. So we have. I mean, maybe they're born with a majority of what Grogu already has, and they've just been teaching him how to hone it better and direct it, and then again he's a baby, so he falls asleep every time he uses it.
Right. When he put the Rancor, like I love that they. Okay, I'm trying to get back around to it.
But it seems like he's gotten a little more powerful. Like he was able to do several things.
Yes,
including put a Rancor to sleep before he was like,
actually
I'm out.
By itself. That's just like that's a freaking Rancor.
Nap time.
But my one issue is the build up for this choice. I don't want to say it this way, but this is the only way I can think of. It was kind of yada yada. The decision was kind of yada yada. Like him showing up in the X-wing with R2, and then them taking Grogu to Mando while they're in the middle of the fight was just kind of like, this is a big decision for Star Wars, let alone for Grogu, and Luke, but for Star Wars' overall whole, storytelling wise, philosophy wise, all this other things. And so they presented last week with this kind of cliffhanger. What is he? Is he not?
Yeah.
And then now it's like, yeah, he chose the shirt, and we moved on. Like there was no like.
Well, I mean, I'm just sitting here trying to think of how they would have done it differently. I mean, I kind of expected Luke to be in the X-wing.
If it was 8 episodes, I think they would have spent the time.
But Luke's probably not going to be happy about his decision.
That's fair.
And, you know, I mean, Luke's kind of whiny. He could have just been like, okay, R2, take him.
Yeah.
And Ben,
I've got to go.
Yeah, I've got other students to teach. I mean, up until the very end, Luke was not really a nice guy.
Yeah.
In a lot of, he was kind of selfish and whiny and
it's a Skywalker way.
It is the Skywalker way.
Skywalker male way. Leia was never whiny and stuff like that. It's the male thing.
Right, it's a male thing. Yeah, look at Kylo. But yeah, my headcanon is he was just like, okay,
I'm done with you.
R2, take him.
Yeah. Him calming the Rancor is something that Ezra had connections with animals, which for me, that was a nice little touch. That not a lot. There's different types of force powers. Mm-hmm. It was Rey's kind of power was a different power set than what Luke had, what Ezra had, what Kanan had, and so it was nice to kind of show that, because I think for a lot of people who weren't really into the prequels and saw all the Jedi as they were and haven't watched the Clone Wars show or Rebels or anything, their example is Luke, Palpatine, Rey, like Kylo, like so it's very specific kind of power sets, and so showing that you can have a connection with animals and stuff like that. I appreciate that because I love Ezra,
and most of Grogu's power that we've seen up till now has been kind of passive, right? Not
the only time it was aggressive when he was choking Kara because they were wrestling or whatever.
Yeah, and that's just, again, that's a little kid thing, right? You don't even know your own strength, and you're hitting my dad. You hit me, you hurt me, whatever. Yeah, you hurt my dad, so most of his stuff has just been like, I'm just gonna float you over there, and not like I've got a lightsaber and I'm gonna, which he didn't get a lightsaber. He's got a cool mithril shirt under his little robe now. So
I'm glad that everybody said it's a mithril shirt. It's Beskar, but it's a mithril shirt.
He totally did the Frodo thing.
It's totally what it is. I love that. I just love it. I'm really excited for what's going to happen next with Grogu and what that storytelling process and what that means and everything going forward, and why was he not around for the sequel trilogy. I don't take that as a negative. I take that as a positive about the stories that we're going to get going forward, because he's super powerful and he's probably going to be around after the sequel trilogy when they decide to tell that story moving on.
It's a giant galaxy, whatever. He's over here. Everybody doesn't have to be together on the same planet all the time.
He saw Dad with his own lighty sword, so guess what? We have to talk about the Boba Fett, Cad Bane kind of conversation. So when they introduced Cad Bane in the last episode, and he shot Cobb Vanth, and kind of like, he's an amazing character, period. But introducing him the way they did and kind of showing that he is, even at his advanced stage, there's no really telling how old he is, but I would say probably in his 50s or 60s of human years. But his race, they could live to 300, like the Wookiees. But the way they introduced him as this big evil bad guy kind of thing. And then for me personally, who I've had a connection with him because of what happened in Clone Wars and like kind of the different way they've used him, he's always the foil to whatever story that they're trying. He's always the one foil messing up a plan or doing something or whatever. Yeah. But he's never been the big bad. And so
he's middle management.
He's the consultant who comes in and does stuff and then and then leaves.
Yeah.
And so we got a fake out showdown between Boba and Cad, which they showed with that lost season of the Clone Wars that they showed the animation, the rough animation of what was going to happen there. We got a kind of a fake out. And Fennec, being the voice of reason, like when did she become the voice of reason? Even like later on in the episode, she's like, we can make so much money off the spice, and Boba's like, no, we're not a spice running planet. But that fake out and Cad trying to bait him into a fight that he knows he's going to win, that Cad knows he's going to win, by telling him that the Tuskens were taken out by the Pikes and that, you have no right here and you can just leave and whatever. And Boba proving that he has evolved as a person.
After Fennec talked him off the ledge.
But sometimes you need somebody. You need your friend to come talk you off a ledge.
Yeah.
But then we get finally later on we get the showdown.
Yeah.
And Cad wins in the draw twice.
Yeah.
But as Boba said, I've got my armor, which is so funny. I love the way they say armor. But then what ultimately it comes down to is that Boba moved on with learning new things and was able to take his Tusken gaffer stick thingy and beat Cad in a different style of fight than just the showdown.
Right. Yeah.
And that's evolution.
Like a one-trick pony. And
he's that gunslinger in the Old West who is always the fastest until he's not.
Right.
And he never had to learn anything else. So when it came down to it, it just that evolution. It's shown, not told.
Right.
And he beats him down really easy with the gaffer stick and then stabs him. Now I think he's still alive because his little thing on his chest was still beeping. After the second time I watched it, the little heart monitor thing on his chest was beeping, and there was no blood. I still think he's dead. We'll talk about somebody else that's not dead. But for me, for everything I've been through with that particular character and he actually trained Boba because he wanted to be able to call himself the best in the galaxy, and he couldn't do it because Jango had been killed. And so he trained his son up so he could beat him later in life. That was that whole conversation about, now I'm going to show you that I'm actually still the best.
Yeah.
And so I found it satisfying because I've had that time. People are going to be pissed because you introduce a freaking cool character and he's in half of one episode and half of the other and dies.
Yeah, cool. You got him in for everybody who knows who he is or whatever, and now we can move on. Again, it's a giant galaxy. There are other bad guys out there than the ones that we already know about.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I love that. I love that they used Cad as an example of the old Boba.
Yeah.
And now entered and had him earn his rights of the new Boba. And I just think that's awesome. I think that's good storytelling. For me, I understand some of the other complaints, but for me, that's good storytelling because you don't always have to tell people. You have to trust your audience. Star Wars fans, it's really hard. I understand. It's really hard. But sometimes you just got to trust your audience that they understand that I'm showing you what's going on. I'm not going to tell you what's going on.
Well, that's kind of a Robert Rodriguez thing, right? He does that a lot.
Yes. Yes, I very much, and that's one of the other thing. I think one of the other complaints that maybe some people will have is the two episodes I feel like people are going to complain about the most is the one where they introduced the mods, which was episode 3, I believe, and then this one, which were both directed by Robert Rodriguez. You either like his style or you don't, and there's no like kind of, but you just that's it.
Yeah,
like his style is very specific for him, very Quentin Tarantino. That's why him and Quentin get along so well.
Right.
Quentin's got his style and he does his thing.
Yep.
Jon Favreau is very much ebbs and flows with what the thing
he can
is.
do Iron Man and he can do
Elf and
Lion King and
Chef,
Jungle Book
and Chef
and he's all over the place.
yeah. So, but I like Robert Rodriguez's style. I like a lot of the Desperado, that kind of that genre of, again, show don't tell storytelling, and so he trusts the audience, and sometimes even I, who like his style, get lost because I'm not paying attention or whatever it is, and whatever it ends up being. And so
that's
I just
what makes it good on the rewatch.
Yeah,
because you pick up more stuff.
Yeah. I want to talk about. Let's talk about Cad Bane or Cobb Vanth. So when everything was done and they're walking through the streets and Finnick says to Boba, "Hey, you should probably go take a long bath in the bathtub tank." He said it's being used, and he had made a joke earlier to Chrysanthemum that he needs a long soak in the back of the tank. But he ends up showing up at the family hangout barbecue thing,
and he's all good.
He's all good. So the post-credit scene is they go to the back of tank room, and it's Cobb in the banta tank, and the modifier is there.
Yep.
Now, our son, who is very much like me and deep into the minutia of Star Wars, said it mirrors the Palpatine making Vader at the end, or Sidious making Vader at the end of Revenge of the Sith. And it does. It has a lot of, adding mechanical pieces to an organic thing and having him heal and stuff like that. It's very interesting that character, that specific character, is the one they decide to bring back for future installments. Because he was not even a main character in a book. He was the main character in an interlude of a book. And they brought him into this show. And
that's what I'm saying. There are so many other people we know about and don't know about to bring in. You don't need to have Cad Bane hang around for the next 3 seasons.
Yeah. I just... it opens up a lot of questions that I'm not really ready to wrap my brain in around for the conversation yet, because I'm still processing the season as overall whole. But I think there's potential to really dive into a character who is, at his base core, ultimate good.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, he didn't even take the spice.
Right.
Which could have helped his town.
And even in his introduction, he felt guilty for running. Was it the first episode of season 2 of Mando? And when the mining guild attacked after the Empire blew up, was destroyed, and he grabbed the thing of coins or whatever it was and ran, and he felt guilty about that. But then he took that and bought Boba's armor from the Jawas, and then was able to free Freetown, and so somebody of ultimate good. We need somebody of ultimate good going forward, because everybody within the Mando verse sphere right now has blood on their hands. All of them. Bo-Katan, armor, everybody. So having him there, I think, is a nice little touch. Let's talk about a little bit what we think is going to happen in the. No, I want to say this, and then we can talk about what's going on in the future. Some people are like, this is the Mando show with co-starring Boba Fett or whatever it was, right? I really appreciate Jon Favreau, if we're going to talk about Jon for a second, and him and Dave Filoni allow the story to go where it goes, and are able to adjust and pivot and change as they go along when they realize that the story is going in a different direction than what they expected. I have no knowledge of what I'm about to say. it very much feels like they had a story arc for the first 2 seasons of Mando. And they got about halfway through the writing of the second season, and they realized that if they're going to continue the story on from where they're at, it's going in a different direction than what they thought. But they still had points that they needed to cover with Boba and with Grogu and Luke and Ahsoka and all that kind of stuff. So as much as the joke has been, this is Mando 2.5, this very much feels like an interlude to a book. Like, we need to do some more development of the world, of the characters around. Here's these little interludes in this. Let's do it on this 7-episode arc.
And maybe they'll do it again.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we'll get a season or 2 of Mando, and then they'll go off and they'll have brought somebody else in that people are like, hey, we need to know more about that, and they'll do another 6-7 episode interlude to whet your appetite while you're waiting on the next season.
I think that there were some rumors running around from reputable sources that are not Variety or the Hollywood Reporter that Katie Sackhoff is going to get a Bo-Katan series, limited series.
There you go.
And she is a character that I would love to spend time with, like with Boba. Her backstory is not good with working with Death Watch, but she also was somebody who learned from her mistakes, and her sister is Satine, and so there's a whole
and there's a gap, right, between Rebels. She was in Rebels, right?
She was in Rebels, yes.
So there's a gap between then and when we saw her in Mando. She's got like a little crew, and they're going around doing stuff, so you need some backstory there.
And so if that's what they're gonna do, and I'm totally cool with it. I like that kind of idea of storytelling with these interludes of 6 episodes while we're waiting for the next thing, whatever. But I think ultimately what they are doing at Lucasfilm with what Favreau and Filoni are doing here is they are building their version of the MCU, and they're in the Mandoverse. I've been calling it the Mandoverse. I'm going to go with it until somebody tells me differently. And to do that, you have to have these individual stories of Iron Man, Mandalorian, Thor, Boba Fett, Captain America, which will probably be Ahsoka. You're doing these stories, and you introduce other characters and have them come in for, Hawkeye showing up would be kind of the equivalent of the Bo-Katan showing up.
Right.
So you build this universe up with interlacing stories on interlacing characters within those one-off shows, and you're building to Thanos. Well, in this universe, as we sit right now, Thanos is not purple, he's blue. And if the Ahsoka series is really going to go with this search for Ezra, if you search for Ezra, you're looking for Thrawn. And if Thrawn is a big enough bad in the Star Wars universe that you need Mando and Boba and Bo-Katan and Ahsoka, and you need all of them together to beat him and what the chiss could possibly be. And so I feel, from my point of view, that that's where they're moving to go forward. And and if they're not, I'm cool with it too. But it feels, I didn't feel this until about halfway through Mandalorian season 2, but especially after Boba Fett, this idea of your world building, your universe building, and this gap that has no storytelling to it right now. And so let's do that. Let's do that.
It's a good theory. I like it.
My only regret is we didn't get Mephisto in this season. I'm really pissed. It made complete sense that Mephisto would be there. All the signs were there. The little horns were there. It was they called him Senior Scratchy. It was Mephisto the entire time.
Oh, Eric Voss is never going to live that down.
My Mephisto was Kira, and so
it was.
And I'm gonna die on the hill. She's got to show up somewhere. So anything else you want to talk about with this series and this episode?
No,
I think we did pretty good about covering everything. If you want to engage in a positive civilized conversation. Please do that in the comments. We would love to have a conversation back and forth about the series, what you thought about the show and everything else. And we're continuing to do stuff as we go along. So please like and subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell for notifications and follow us on all the social media stuff: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Links are in the description down below. And until the next Star Wars show, which is May 25th with the Kenobi series. That was announced today. Yay. And until next time, cult members, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.